We've got a 96 Dodge 1500 pickup here. We've diagnosed a fuel pump issue. We're going to walk through the steps in replacing the fuel pump. First, we're going to bleed the pressure off the system. We always want to capture our fuel into a safe container. Now we'll remove the negative battery cable before we raise the vehicle. In order to do a proper fuel pump replacement, we need to clean the inside of the tank, and that will require the removal of the tank. Before we begin to lower the fuel tank, we will disconnect the fuel filler hose from the filler tube and also disconnect the vent hose from the vent tube. Now we will disconnect the tank straps and lower the tank in order to gain access to the fuel line fittings and also electrical connection. Now we will disconnect the fuel line fitting. This is a pinch type fitting. Remove the emissions hose, which is a slide-on hose fitting. There is a safety tab that has to be slid over in order to disconnect the electrical connection. It's easier to work with a lighter tank, so always be sure that your fuel level is as low as possible. Now that we've got the tank out from the vehicle, we will clean the outside of the tank before removing the pump. Now that we've cleaned the outside of the tank, we're ready to remove the fuel pump module. One of the first things we want to do, we want to remove this retainer from the fuel line fitting. We need to be sure and use a spanner wrench, which is available at any local parts store, to remove the tank locking ring. Always be sure and adjust your spanner wrench so that it fits the tank ring properly. Sometimes the tank seal will be dry and not allow the fuel pump module to come out freely. So you may have to take your screwdriver and just lightly pry it up out of the tank. Now that we've got it free from the tank, we can remove our locking ring from the top of the pump module. Now we're ready to remove the fuel pump module from the tank. Keep in mind, the lower portion of this module is actually a reservoir that will hold a residual amount of fuel. We can bring the unit completely out of the tank, and then we want to be sure and capture any fuel that may be in that lower portion. It's always advisable to clean the inside of your tank. As you'll note on this strainer, there's quite a bit of debris and it's discolored quite a bit from contamination. We want to be sure and put the new fuel pump into a clean environment. Now that we've cleaned the interior of our tank, we're ready to install the new Airtex fuel pump module. There's two items of special note on this particular fuel pump module assembly. We will have to remove our rollover valve from our old unit and install onto the new unit. Be careful in removing this valve. As you can see, prying on the valve, not on the rubber gasket itself. Now that we have it removed, we can clean the gasket area. My suggestion is to remove the grommet from the valve. At this point, we can also use a light lubricant to lubricate the grommet for reinstallation. Once we get the grommet installed into the module assembly, now we can lubricate the ID of the grommet and slide the rollover valve into it. You'll also note that there is a wire adapter. The original equipment connector was a 6-pin style connector. On this particular application, they were only using 4 of the original 6 pins. On the Airtex fuel pump module, we have a short adapter that goes from the 6-pin style connector to the 4-pin style connector that's on the new fuel pump module. On top of the tank, there's a set of hash marks. These are locating points for when we install the fuel pump module. You will see on the top of the module assembly is a pointer. This pointer will be pointed between the hash marks when we install this unit. Now we will install the fuel pump sealing ring, and we will install the fuel pump module down into the tank. Now that we've got the module assembly installed into the tank, we can install our locking ring. We will now need to use our spanner wrench. Once we have it tight, we're ready to install the unit back into the vehicle. We'll reinstall the fuel line retainer back into the end of the fuel line. Again, note, as we noted earlier, the 6-pin style connector that will reattach to the fuel pump harness. Now that we've got the tank positioned, we can reconnect our electrical connection Slide the emissions hose into place, and now we can reconnect the fuel line. At this point, we need to start our fuel filler hose onto the filler tube. Now we'll reattach the tank straps. We're ready to reinstall the fuel filler hose onto the filler tube and also the vent hose onto the vent line. Now we'll reattach the negative battery cable, and we will cycle the key 2 to 3 times to recharge the system, start the vehicle, and monitor the fuel pressure, making sure it's within vehicle specs. To remove the gauge, we'll shut the engine off and bleed the pressure from the system using the pressure relief on the gauge, making sure to capture any fuel in a safe container.